Seven Noahide laws. Seven Noahide laws are the basic laws that were given by the Torah for all of humanity. And as the Rambam says, that today it's our obligation to try to teach the whole world, to perfect the world by teaching them this code. So we're giving you a little bit the Kabbalistic insight into these mitzvahs, into this code, which came at the very beginning of creation. So to Adam and to Noah, Hashem gives 7 mitzvahs. First 2 we studied so far was Aleph, stood for Evim and Achai, cruelty to animals. Beis was Birkas Hashem. We spoke last week about respecting our God, and respecting those that are created in the image of God. And now we come to Gimel. Gimel is Gzela, theft. So today we're going to talk about the prohibition against theft in the Torah, which again, obviously, is repeated again in the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. But this law already pre-existed before the 10 Commandments in the very first laws that were given to humanity in the Noahide Code. And one of the very important laws, which is the law against theft. As we see just before the destruction of the world in Noah's time, one of the great sins of mankind was Hamas, was thievery. They didn't respect the ownership of other people, and they said, what's yours is mine, what mine is yours, So whatever you have belongs to me. So who says there is really an inherent ownership in an object? We respect you, but your things, God created the world for everyone. So the Torah introduces the concept of theft, that there is ownership of different things in this world. So not only do you own your body, not only do you have to take care of your body, not only do you have to be sensitive to that, you also have to be sensitive to the property of other people. And you're not allowed to steal it. Now, what does it have to do with Kabbalah, with the Jewish spirituality? It has a lot to do with Jewish spirituality, because our belief is that if you own something, and for some reason, either you received it through a purchase or through an inheritance, or through any of the other means that you get to own things, there is a degree of bashert in that. So you follow what I'm saying? If Hashem gave you something, if he gave you your house, or he gave you your car, or he gave you your objects that you own, or he gave you some inheritance of some souvenir that your parents had, it's not coincidence. You own that thing because that's part of your tikkun. It's part of your correction. The things that you own, you have a priority to other people to work on it and correct it. And as we know in Kabbalah, they speak a lot about sparks of godliness that are in everything. So it's our job to elevate those things and to extract the godliness that's in it and to try to transform it into holiness. So everyone has not only they have their own personal life, but they have what's known as chelik ba'olam. Everyone has a part of the world that we're sort of responsible for. And usually that responsibility starts with our family, with ourselves, with our objects, with our possessions. And that's called our portion in this world. And it's our responsibility to treat it properly and to protect it and to elevate it and to try to do good things with it. So if Hashem gives you, let's say, a certain amount of money, it's our job to elevate that money that we own. How do we elevate it? By giving tzedakah, by buying good things, by treating our families. Those are all mitzvahs of the Torah. So by doing mitzvahs with our money, we elevate it and we fulfill our purpose in life. Now comes someone else and steals our money from us. They are taking away that opportunity, which is God-given from us, and they've taken it now to themselves. So in addition to the logical reason why we shouldn't steal, because why steal for you? You'll steal for me, and then there's no end to it. That's the logical reason. But now we're saying there also is a spiritual reason to it. What the spiritual reason is, if you own something, God intended it. Everything is bashert, everything is meant to be. The things you have are your things, and they are connected to your mission. The Kabbalah says not only are they connected to your mission, not only do you have a duty to elevate those things, but actually those things are connected to your soul. Right, so that's something special to say. The things that you own connected to your soul. So when someone passes away, a loved one, and they give you something, if you want to connect to the soul of the loved one, it's those things they gave you. It's a portal, it's a channel to the soul of that person. So if a loved one left over something, don't just poo-poo it. Realize that was connected to them and it's connected to their soul. So your possessions that you own, you infuse your soul in it. If you have an old book, an old siddur, old machzor or something, I always have people coming to me and they want to clean the house of Bobby, whatever. They come to the shul. How can we get rid of all these Hebrew books? I said, first of all, you need the Hebrew books as well. You need to read them. You need to study the Torah. You need to study. But in addition to that, what do you like? Those books, you have your parent in those books, If that's a machzor they used for many years in the shul, and they wrote something, a little inscription inside from their bar mitzvah, they received it on their bar mitzvah, it's connected to their soul. It's an ownership. Don't just throw it away. I always have people coming, I don't need the books anymore. Rabbi, take them. What are you going to do with it? I think I'm like a lot of times, some people, they're afraid I might say no to taking the books. So they come to in the shul when no one's there, bring a box, drop it off, and run away. People do. A lot of people do that. You wouldn't believe it, but we do have cameras, by the way, so we see exactly who came and who drops it off and who. I wouldn't want to embarrass the people, but we know exactly who you are. We know you. We know who you are. You can't hide. You can run, but you can't hide. So those books, those old books people own, ownership is not it's not just a mechanism of who owns what. It's not just a court thing. It's also it's a soul thing. It's connected to your soul. Yaakov Avinu, in the next parsha, we read that Jacob, when he was leaving, he was traveling over the Jordan River. He went over the Jordan River. Can you guys hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay. So he was traveling over the Jordan River with his family. He sent off his whole family and everything. And he went over the Jordan River himself. And then he reminded himself he left some stuff, right? There's a great danger. And he went back across the river to bring a few small objects. Why? Because your objects are not just things you discard. Your object is your object. It's your mission in life. It belongs to you. If God made it belong to you, so you went back across the river to bring some things, The Alter Rebbe was running away from Napoleon. The Alter Rebbe in the War of 1812. There was a big debate amongst the rabbis. Some rabbis in Russia supported Napoleon, and some supported the Tsar. And the Alter Rebbe actually supported the Tsar, Russia, instead of Napoleon, even though Napoleon was granting freedom. But he felt Napoleon was a forced freedom. It wasn't like today where you have a choice. In those days, it was anti-religion. So they had all the big French philosophers with him that were coming with him. Alter Rebbe felt it was a danger to the religion be Napoleonized. So he was backing the Tsar, and some of the other great rabbis at the time actually backed Napoleon. But then Napoleon advanced; he was advancing, and so the Alter Rebbe was worried for him and his family. So they started traveling away from the front lines of the war, and they started going eastward, away from Napoleon's advances. And the story goes that the Alter Rebbe was leaving one place and they left a few things behind. So the Alter Rebbe said, "No, we need to pick up." He left some slippers. His favorite slippers, I guess. He left his favorite slippers. He left them over there. So he said he has to go back to go pick up the slippers before Napoleon reaches there. And they asked Alter Rebbe, "Why? You're putting your life like in danger to get your slippers?" He said, "Yeah, because your objects, things that belong to you, are yours, and they are inherently connected to your soul." And he says Napoleon was like a magician. He wasn't a magician. He was a guy a spiritual guy. And there was the tradition amongst the spiritualists that if you get an object from someone else, you can impact them by having that object that belongs to the person. So he was concerned that Napoleon will get a hold of his slippers and he'll be able to somehow have an effect on him through his object, through his clothing, an article of his clothing. So we see from that story, that even a pair of slippers, you think, what is it? A pair of slippers? You get another pair of slippers. No, it wasn't taken for granted. Hashem gives you something; it's yours. It belongs to you. It's not just connected to you; it's connected to your soul. So now you're gonna think twice before you discard your old slippers. You think twice before you throw out your old pajamas or anything else. You're allowed to discard of your clothing, whatever. But it's the concept that I'm trying to develop over here, is that there is ownership, and that people own things, and that's why theft is a terrible thing, not only because it destroys civilization and society, the order of society, and it breaks down the barriers between people. They say good fences make good neighbors. Besides for that aspect, it also has to do with the things that you own are inherently connected to your soul, and that's part of you said before, it's part of your mission. A, it's part of your mission, and B, it touches your soul. So object that you have, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was very, very big on previously Rebbe's library. Someone took away a few books, stole a few books from the library. The Rebbe was totally upset. And in fact, he took this person even to court. There's a few old books. I mean, they were expensive books because they were part of an ancient library, but not so much the books. The Rebbe says it's like a piece of the Rebbe. It's a piece of the Rebbe. The books the Rebbe studied and learned it. It's not like just a book that he happened to own. No, he learned in that book. It's part of his soul. So the Rebbe fought for the Chassidim that they should get back these books and they shouldn't be given over to people with private inheritances. Rebbe said it belongs to the Rebbe, belongs to Chassidim. So the Rebbe was very upset when this cousin, a nephew of his, started taking away books from the library. He was very, very upset about that, because he felt like if you own something, it's not just a random thing. It connects to the soul of the person. So the Rebbe felt the Frierdiker Rebbe's connection to us is his library, his books. So this is like a different view on the whole thing, Our books have a piece of our soul. The Rebbetzin, the Rebbe's wife, was actually deposed in the court. They asked her questions, came to her house to ask her questions, with the lawyers and the prosecutor present, the judge, and she, the argument she made, which was a very strong argument, she said that they asked her, who do the books belong to? She said, to the Hasidim. She said, so why you say that? She said, because the Rebbe belonged to Hasidim, so his books also belong to Hasidim. So the Rebbe and his books is one thing. So if the Rebbe belongs to the Hasidim, so the books also belong to the Hasidim. So we see the intimate connection of books and possessions in general shouldn't be taken for granted, and they have something to do with sparks of our soul are in it, and we need to elevate it and bring it back. And then there's other things that we have ownership, which is much more subtle. So we understand theft, objects, you steal objects, but there is another form of theft. It's called intellectual theft. And if you ever heard it, it's a concept of copyright, where if somebody, let's say, writes a book. So I wrote a book, and I worked hard to make the book. But then somebody takes my book, and they make photocopies of it. Oh, you have it there. Wow, Arlene, very good. So close to you. So you write, yeah, thank you so much. So you write a book, and then somebody writes it, makes a photocopy and uses it for their own purposes. So that's known as intellectual theft. A loss. You still have the book is still there, right? And nobody stole any object from you. Same thing as you have ideas, you come up with an invention. So there's an idea of copywriting the invention. Why? Because you put a lot of effort into that, so people shouldn't be allowed to take it away from you and steal it from you. And you always have big companies, they take away things from little people, and they use those ideas and they know how to make a lot of money on it. And the little guy loses out. But is that really theft? Is that included in the Noahide code, or is this sort of like a... Now, obviously, when you have the laws of copyright, that's the courts, right? So we said one of the 7 Noahide laws is that every society should put the courts into place. And if the society decides that there is copyright, meaning that there is intellectual property people have and you have to register it, and then you're not allowed to steal it, then that becomes the law of the land. But is it actually theft, or is it just another law of copyright? Really, if you look in the Talmud, you find that there are many laws referring to things that you own because you worked on it, right? Not only because you own it, but it's something that you put a lot of effort into. In the Talmud, they have numerous laws about different things that, let's say, a poor person, he goes to a public tree, it's public, and he climbs up, and he takes a fruit that's hanging there, which is public property, and he brings it down, and then you go and you steal it from him. So the question is that theft? It never belonged to him. But he put a lot of effort to climb up to the top of the tree and to bring down that fruit, that apple, or whatever it is in the public. And then the police come and say, well, what are you doing over here? You say, it's public property. It doesn't belong to him. It belongs to me, just like it belongs to the poor person. But the halacha is no. Person put effort into it, so that is a form of ownership. So even though everyone could go up and climb up and take that fruit, but since he invested effort, that is a piece of the ownership in that fruit. Same thing in another section of the Talmud, you find the flip side, where a person is responsible for their actions and for their misactions, and we are responsible for damages. So let's say my animal hurts someone, so I'm responsible for my animal hurting someone, right? That's one form of damages. Then let's say my animal goes and bites someone, right? You're responsible for that as well. Your animal goes and tramples on somebody's field and destroys something that they owned. You're responsible for that too. So you're responsible not only for yourself, your own damages, but you're responsible for your animal's damages. Another case of damages is you light a fire. Right? So you're responsible for the fire. Now, the fire, you could argue, really doesn't belong to you. Right? You started the fire, so you're responsible for it because you created this hazard. But why are you respond? Why are you responding? The fire now goes into one house, from one house to another to another. You don't own the other houses, right? You just started a little match a mile away. Or you say, no, you're responsible for all of it. Because of your work, what you did, you created something, a monster, a hazard, and then you take ownership for that. Like we say, you have to take responsibility for it. You have to live up to it. Not only responsibility for it, but also it's a form of ownership. You are the owner of that fire, even though the fire was burning on someone else's wood. All right, so think of that for a moment. So there could be an ownership, which is not necessarily a physical thing that you own. The same also applies with another form of damage. So I'm giving you a little bit Talmud over here. It's Kabbalah class, but it's good to know. There's another form of damage, which is when you create a hazard in the public place. Like you walk into the middle of the street, you don't own the street, right? But you go and you dig, let's say, a pit, and somebody falls and hurts themselves in that pit. So you say, hold on, it's not my pit. I don't own it. So why am I responsible for it? The answer is no, you do own it. You have to, because you dug it in the public place, you created a hazard. That hazard belongs to you. So maybe the walls of that pit belongs to the public domain, but the space that you created over there, right? Even though it's not a physical space, it's just empty air. You have ownership of what goes on in there, and somebody falls in there and breaks their foot. You're responsible for it. So again, we find ownership can many times be defined not only by a thing that you bought or inherited or transferred the property. It could also be something a little bit more intangible, ownership. So the same way applies to not only to damages and not only to the poor man that takes the fruit down, but also to intellectual property. The intellectual property that we have belongs to us. We take ownership of it. And especially if you copyright it, that's even more. So there can be a form of theft by stealing an idea from someone. Even though that idea is now, everybody can make ideas and people can hear about it, and then everyone understands the idea. Just because you initiate, yes, when you initiate something, you have an ownership of that object. And so copyright, if someone, let's say, makes a tape of something or a movie or whatever it is, that's the basis. It's someone else's idea, even though you're just making a copy of it, and I'm not taking it away from you. I go to the library, public library, and I make a photocopy of the page. So most people say you could, a single page you're allowed to, but if you want to redo the book, the whole book, that's infringing on the copyright law. It's infringing on someone else's hard work. So they've invested and spent hours and hours in making a book, and then you just take the whole thing, and you photocopy it. Or they made a movie, and you take and you make a copy, but then re-show the movie without financially rewarding that person. So this is what it is. So we have two forms. We have many forms of ownership. But what most important is, so we have the physical ownership of something, and also the spirit, the mental ownership, the intellectual ownership of some things. We have many ownerships. But all of them, what they all have in common is that if you own something and Hashem gave you something, He gave you a talent, let's say, so you're able to come up with an idea, that's your talent and that belongs to you. And no one else can take it away from you, because that is sort of your portion in this world, your spiritual portion in this world. And so that this sort of sums up third of the Noahide code. The first was cruelty to animals, which is also sensitive to the animal kingdom. The second law was the law of being respectful to God and that which He created. And the third law, which we studied today, is the law of possessions. That we realize and recognize that not only is man created in the image of God, but also the things that they own is an extension of the person, of the soul of the person, and that too must be respected. Those boundaries need to be respected. So that's about it. I'm on my way now to the conference in New York. So I'm making the class a little bit shorter today, but I'm off to go. I'm going to visit in New York, and I'm going to go also to the Rabbi's burial place. I'll pray for all you guys there. And I'm going to meet up with 5,000 other Chabad rabbis from around the world. That's a great honor and privilege. And we're going to come back. I'm going to come back even more inspired. And I'll come back and I'll give you all a taste of the inspiration. So wish everybody a good Shabbos.
Look forward. We look forward to it. Thank you.
Have a safe trip and enjoy the conference, and safe return, Rabbi.
God, if anybody has any questions, you're more than welcome.
Drive safe, Rabbi. Come home safe. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. We'll see.
It's not a question. It's just that when you were talking about people giving the books, my kids left hundreds and hundreds of books from law school. We didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't want it. Everything's on the computer. The library was a proud owner of hundreds of books.
Throw it in the garbage. Okay, very good.
Have a good Shabbos and a good
Have a
trip.
wonderful time. Safe trip. Awesome time. Thank you.